Good morning, everyone. Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me back again, Pastor Gordon. And it's just very exciting to be able to share such important truths with people. I go around the world now teaching on the mind-brain connection. And as a scientist, it's very significant that I tell you why science is so important in church. Because if you think of God, we all know God is the source of everything. I mean, there's no question about that. Yet there's often a debate in theological and church circles about whether science should be spoken about in church. It's much better now, but 20 years ago, I was often challenged about how could you be a scientist and believe in God and so on. And I would answer, how can you not? If you think of it, the word science comes from the word skura, and skura means knowledge. And who's the source of all knowledge? God. So science is God's stuff. So last night when I was teaching, I never said one single scripture, and I did that on purpose, to show you that if I talk about science, I'm still talking about God's stuff. And there's one thing that if you want to draw people to God, you need to find a language of neutrality. And one of the quickest ways of getting people to listen, and this has been my experience, and this is why I share this with the church globally, is talk science. You talk politics, there will be an argument. You talk religion, there will be an argument. But you talk science, everyone listens. And you're still talking God's stuff. So it's an incredible tool to have to bring connection and communication between people. Because really our goal as humans following Jesus, loving God, is to reflect God's glory across the earth. And we can only do that if we are truly operating in God's image. And God's image is one of love. We are image bearers. We are love bearers. And I don't always think that the church reflects that kind of love sufficiently. And that's one of my goals, is to help people to really understand the science of love. What is love? How are we made in love? What does it mean to be an image bearer of God? How do you bring heaven to earth? How do you activate this incredible wisdom of God that we are immersed in? And so a lot of the scientific research I've done is to try to help people to do that. Now, last night I gave a kind of overview of the concepts of mindsets, and I started introducing people to the mind-brain connection. Today, part 2, now we're going to dive a little bit more into mental health and understanding a little bit more about our love, power, and sound minds. What does that mean? The third session, I'm going to go into the concept of what it means to be the science behind being gifted, being wired for love, your identity, and then also talk a little bit about how to be a steward of creation. These are still only touching the tip of the iceberg. So I encourage all of you to follow me on social media. Don't follow anyone else, just follow me, because I've got good tips. Every day I'm going to give you mental self-care tips that are going to teach you how to renew your mind daily. Okay, I teach if you really want to know what I teach as a scientist, and that I do, and that my overarching goal in my research is I teach people how to renew the mind. Romans 12:2, and the impact of renewing the mind on the physical being, on our body and our brain. So all my mental self-care techniques, all my podcasts, my YouTube channel, all the things that are free that you can subscribe to and get information on are going to help you live a life of renewing of your minds. Because if you look at the scriptures, we are told that we are supposed to be renewing our minds. And ing is present continuous. So you're supposed to be always continuously in the present renewing your mind, which means you're always supposed to be renewing your mind. And if you link that onto the other scripture that is very important, every scripture obviously is important, but in terms of the work that I do and in terms of how we need to be decent, loving humans, reflecting God's image, is bring all thoughts into captivity. Okay? So all means all. Now, you think on average somewhere between 8,000 and 180,000 thoughts a day. As scientists, we take that average at being about 30,000. If you do the math, which I've done, and I've put that into this book, you can see how I've calculated this. Essentially, what the science shows is that we are able to bring those thoughts into captivity every 10 seconds. So as humans, science shows us that we are able to renew our minds and bring all thoughts into captivity every 10 seconds, which means that God has designed us humans able to communicate with God every 10 seconds, which means that you are, if you test this out, it's 6 times a minute, at least 6 times a minute that you're supposed to be connecting with God. And that may sound easy, it may sound hard, I don't know how it sounds to you, but when you start doing it, you'll actually see how you haven't been doing it. How you actually only bring thoughts now and then into captivity. And when you kind of prompted, like in church, or when you're praying, or when you kind of trying to be all holy and whatever. But we're supposed to be doing this all the time. So as you open your eyes in the morning and you start communicating and you read that email and you have that challenge with your kids, or you whatever's going on in your life because of the events and circumstances happening around you, are you connecting with God every 10 seconds? Because that is alwaysness. That is renewing of your mind. That is present, continuous, constantly bringing all thoughts into captivity. We're not told to drug all thoughts into captivity or suppress all thoughts into captivity. We are told to bring. And bring means hard work. It is hard work. It is a deliberate, intentional decision that you're going to need to make to bring all thoughts into captivity and renew your mind. So this fascinated me as a young scientist back in the 80s. And I wanted to see how this works. And so how do we bring a thought? What is a thought in the first place? What's your mind? What is memory? What is learning? So all my work over the 30 years has hinged around understanding the mind-brain connection. What are thoughts? How do thoughts form? How do you bring them into captivity? What is your mind? How is it different to the brain? And all those interesting questions. And I have summarized a lot of my work in my books. I've written 17 books. The books Mac referred to, and I've got them up on the table over here. I call this the Mind Toolbox. These are my 4 most recent books, and I'll touch a little bit on these in today's sessions. And I did last night, and we have an app that also kind of matches this. And the reason I'm telling you this is because there's so much information. I already bombarded those people last night. Who was here last night? Okay, so I already bombarded you, but and I'm going to bombard you again. But I don't mind bombarding you because you're intelligent. So as a scientist, I know you're intelligent and I'm respecting your intelligence. So I'm challenging you. And if you rise to the challenge, you will walk out of here way more intelligent than you walked in. Because intelligence is totally within your grasp. You're made in God's image after all. You have at your core intelligence. What you just have to do is develop it. And you have to be aware and discerning of what you are focusing your energy and your attention on, because that will influence the effectiveness of how you develop your mind. So right up front, let's understand what the mind is quickly for those that weren't here last night, and let's understand the difference between the mind and the brain, and then I'm going to dive into today's concepts. Okay, so your mind is basically your spirit and your soul. Your mind is your thinking, feeling, and choosing. The most simple definition of mind is your ability to uniquely, as a human, uniquely think and feel and choose. Those 3 always go together. You will hear me say this repeatedly. And it's a concept that when you get this, it will revolutionize how you focus on life, how you run your life. You're always thinking. You're a thinking being. You're made in the image of a thinking God. So you are always thinking. When you think, you also feel. We see that Jesus felt. Feeling is part of who you are as a human. Feeling is good. Feelings are good. You can have toxic feelings and you can have healthy feelings. But you are wired for love because you're made in God's image. So feelings are a good thing. We're often told, don't feel it, don't think. I don't know why they say that in church. Don't feel, don't think. When Jesus felt and thought, when God designed thinking, feeling, and choosing, and that's part of your mind of Christ that you have. It's how you thinking, feeling, and choosing. That's the issue. Not that you mustn't think, you must, because it takes away from your spirituality. Spirituality is intellectualizing. Spirituality is thinking, feeling, and choosing. But the question is, are you thinking, feeling, and choosing in wisdom? Or are you thinking and feeling and choosing disconnected from wisdom? And that is a choice that you make. And the only way you are going to think, feel, and choose, which means use your mind correctly, is to constantly be renewing your mind. So this means that you have to be constant and deliberately self-regulating what you're thinking, feeling, and choosing every 10 seconds. And science shows us that this is what you're designed to do. So the only way that you're going to be constantly connected to God is by you choosing to constantly bring all thoughts into captivity. Can you see that I've used circular reasoning? I've gone around in a complete circle here to show you that you mustn't take a scripture in isolation. You must blend the scriptures and you must marry them with science, because science tells you how to and scripture tells you the story. And when you blend the two, it's two sides of the coin and you'll get the right picture. So don't say I'm going to renew my mind and then don't renew your mind, or only renew your mind when you come to church on a Sunday and it lasts for 1 hour and then you're all horrible again. Okay? Or it means you're constantly working at it and you're honest and humble about the fact that you've made a mistake and you're lifting yourself up and you're moving forward and so on. Okay, so mind is therefore your spiritual, eternal part of you. It is the 99% part of you. 99% of you is spiritual. Only 1% of you is physical. Doesn't mean the physical is not important. It's extremely important, which is why in the third session I'm going to talk about being a steward of creation. You are created as a spirit, soul, and body. You have to steward all of it. You can't just eat junk food and then pray grace over it and think God's a genie and going to turn that junk food into kale, organic kale. Okay? It doesn't work like that. Yet people say that to me, oh, I'll just pray grace over it. That's such an insult to God. When you say grace, when you eat food, it is such a gift of life. We need to honor that gift of life, and we need to sustain the beautiful brain and body that God has given us, which is what our spirit has to work through. So your spirit has to work through your brain and your body. So you've got to look after your brain and your body, and you've got to look after your spirit. You've got to develop your spirit. And you develop your spirit through your mind. Your decision to come to church today, your decision to sit down, your decision to connect with whoever you spoke to this morning, the decision about what to wear, the decision about what to eat, the decision about how you listen to me is all mind work. And if your mind is not being renewed to the Spirit of God every 10 seconds, you are going to be distracted. You're going to be thinking of this. You're going to be jealous of that. You're going to be focusing on this. You're going to be, your attention's all over the place. You may not hear what I'm saying. You may block what I'm saying because something I say doesn't quite ring with how you understand it. And then you miss something. So open your mind, be discerning. And when I say open your mind to wisdom. And you are immersed in wisdom. Right now you are sitting in gravitational fields. Gravitational fields are the energy around us. And the there was a Nobel Prize was given just at the beginning, last year's Nobel Prize to a group of physicists who identified a way of starting to understand and see gravitational fields. When we talk about gravitational fields, we're talking about complex quantum physics. We're talking about the fact that as humans, we're immersed in energy, we're made of energy, and quantum physicists tell us that all as humans, the energy that keeps us alive and the energy that we're immersed in all comes from a source. In fact, 95% of quantum physicists believe that we are connected to a supernatural source. We all know what that is, God. Okay, so quantum physics is considered the most fundamental and accurate of sciences. It undergirds every other science, every bit of knowledge about how everything functions, and it is considered to be the most accurate. So the most accurate of sciences is focusing on our spirituality and the fact that we are connected to a source, which is God. Bishop Berkeley, 350 years ago, said that humans would not exist if God was not looking. So whether you believe in God or not, and I know you believe in God because you're in church today, but if you believe in God or not, you still exist because you're connected to God, because God is the source of life. So when I talk about energy, I'm talking about life. If you don't believe in energy, don't use your cell phone, don't use the internet, don't eat, don't wear clothes, because all of that is energy. Okay, so energy is not some weird thing. Energy is how we keep alive, and how we are using our energy and in terms of connecting to God is very important. So you like a radio, and if you think of how a radio works, it takes non-physical electromagnetic light waves, converted through complex electronic equipment, and out comes a sound wave. You are complex electronic equipment. You have this brain and body that is extremely complex, and you have this mind that is separate but that works through the brain and the body. So your mind, this thinking, feeling, and choosing, is this energy. It's this non-physical spiritual part of you, and it is connected to God. And you choose deliberately and intentionally every 10 seconds to renew your mind and bring all thoughts into captivity, because everything you're thinking, feeling, and choosing is determining everything about you and everything you do and say. And you can choose to connect to the source, to step into the gravitational fields of wisdom, to step into Hebrews 11:1, which is faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. So you are, hear what I'm saying, you are immersed in the ingredients of wisdom. Substance and evidence already exists. Wisdom is in existence. God is alwaysness. God is not waiting for your tomorrow, your next week, your next year. God is alwaysness. God created time. So when we get into the spiritual realm, which is 99% of who you are already immersed in alwaysness. So what do you have to do? You have to use your intellectual mind to think, feel, and choose correctly, to access the substance and evidence, which is the guidance and the wisdom and the discernment we need for the next decision that you make. And you need to be doing that all the time. So you need to choose to do that, which means you need to be very deliberate in how you are thinking and feeling and choosing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is mental health. And that is the human condition. And that is what Jesus showed us we should do. We see this in Jesus, in the life of Jesus, in terms of how we're supposed to function. We see in the stories in the Bible, when people do operate in wisdom, what happens? And when they don't operate in wisdom, what happens? So we have the Bible telling us the stories, the demonstration of humanity through Jesus Christ, and science telling us how the whole thing works. God gives us a perfect package. What we have to do is take the time to invest in understanding this and not become reactive humans, but become proactive, bringing all thoughts into captivity, renewing the mind humans. Because after all, you do not have a spirit of fear. You have a spirit of love, power, and soundness. So are you using your spirit of love, power, and soundness to discern the wisdom of God every 10 seconds by renewing your mind, by bringing all thoughts into captivity? Or are you just bumbling through life, being tossed by all the things that are happening? Because you cannot control the events and circumstances of your life because they're the result of other people's choices, but you can control your reactions. Are you controlling your reactions? That is leading a life of worship. That is leading a life of prayerfulness. When the scriptures tell us that we need to constantly pray, that's what I'm telling you to do. Constantly praying means that every 10 seconds you're talking to the Spirit of God. If you're talking to the Spirit of God every 10 seconds and accessing the substance and evidence that is wisdom, that is immersed in the gravitational fields, which quantum physics explains to us mathematically, if you're doing that, what are you doing? You are praying constantly. So you're not then bumbling through in a disconnected way and then now and then stepping into a state of prayer and getting all holy and then stepping out of it, but you're actually living in it. And when you do step out of it, you become very aware very quickly. So all my books teach you how to learn to discern when you've stepped out of what I call your perfect you. Because when you're operating in your image-bearing, love-designed, thinking, feeling, choosing nature, your love, power, and sound mind, your perfect you nature, you are going to be operating and connecting with the wisdom of God. You're going to become a radio that then is going to connect into the truth of God. It's going to move through every one of the 75 to 100 trillion cells of your body, and that energy is then going to come out in the form of wisdom by the words that you speak and the actions that you perform. Because as a thinking, feeling, choosing human being, you are taking my words right now into your brain as sound waves. All the visuals are electromagnetic waves. There's quantum energy, and you are pushing that through your brain, and you are causing an electrical, chemical, and genetic response in your brain, and you are building my words into protein, thought, trees that look like the trees on the stage inside your brain. So you are converting mind into matter in your brain as you listen to me now at speeds of 400 billion actions per second. That is a powerful mind. That is a love mind. You do not have a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, and of soundness. And on a love, power, sound mind, you have free will. I lay before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. Because every choice that you make has eternal value. It will live forever, and it will pass through the DNA, through the sperm and the ova to the next generations. And the generations are observing your behaviors and are assimilating your behaviors. And by what you say, you are influencing other people's genetic expression. Your genes change. They're not fixed. Genes do not stay fixed. Genes constantly change by our experiences. So whatever we experience and whatever we inherit is changing our genetic code constantly. Up until the 2000s, they didn't believe our genes could change. But now we know our genes can change. In the 80s, they didn't believe our brain could change. I was told I was ridiculous for researching that. You can go and look at my TED talk, my TEDx talk that I talked about. They said it was ridiculous. My professors used to say that's a ridiculous question. But I had some professors that really believed in what I was doing. And I said to them, if you deliberately and intentionally use your mind, you will change your brain. So when your brain changes, then your mind uses your brain to produce what you say and what you do. As a man thinks in his heart, out of the abundance of the heart. So when we talk about heart, it's metaphorical for all the cells of your brain and your body collectively and for the memory that you built into your brain. So you are 99% spiritual, non-physical, powerful, love-designed, thinking, feeling, and choosing. How amazing is that? Ladies and gentlemen, you do not have circuitry for fear and anxiety and trauma and irritation and frustration and jealousy and whining and all that stuff. You don't have that in your brain. You make it with your love, power, and your sound mind. You're in a Genesis moment every moment of every day. Right now you are in the Genesis moment. What you think, feel, and choose produces fruit. It produces physical fruit in the brain in form of protein trees. It produces spiritual fruit in the form of a non-physical memory that you form. And those two combine together to produce what you say and you do, which is the external fruit that we see. Okay? So everything you say and do was first the result of your thinking, feeling, choosing, building a physical thought, building a non-physical thought, the combination of the two, and boom, you say and do. You are that radio. Are you taking that energy and converting it through your brain and your body and speaking like a clanging gong? Or are you speaking the wisdom of God? You can only speak the wisdom of God if you connect to the Spirit of God every 10 seconds. And this is something that you don't have a choice. I mean, you do. Sorry. You can choose to do whatever you want. But when you choose to constantly operate out of wisdom and you start feeling like your life's falling apart, don't blame the devil. I am so tired of the church turning around and telling me that the devil's attacking me. I must be doing something right. The devil's attacking me. There's spiritual evil in this. Stop talking like that, because what are we doing? We are insulting what Jesus did at the cross. Jesus rose from the dead and defeated the enemy. Jesus defeated evil. Therefore, evil, if it's defeated, has no power. Please read the Bible correctly. It says Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus defeated evil. It also says that you have a spirit of love, power, and soundness. It doesn't say that evil has a spirit of power. It's defeated. Something that's defeated by God is defeated. So every time you say the devil did it to you or made you do it or is attacking you, you are pouring your limited energy resource, because you are living in a physical body and your physical body gets tired. You know that. So you have limited energy while you're awake. And if you are pouring that into the toxic side of things, you are limiting it for renewing the mind. So you need to decide if you're going to start whining, moaning, complaining about the things that are going on in your life and blaming the devil. You've used the energy, you've lost energy for the positive stuff, for the stuff that you're supposed to be doing. So what we need to do is, when we make a wrong decision, when we recognize we haven't dealt with the trauma, we need to embrace it. And I spoke about this last night. We need to embrace it and celebrate it. Now, I'm not saying celebrate the toxicity. I'm not saying celebrate the toxic stuff. I'm saying celebrate the fact that you are aware of it. Because according to science, we understand that as soon as we are aware of something, as soon as we bring it up, we are able to weaken it. And as soon as it's weak, it can change. Okay, so the basic principle operating in mental health is the following. The human condition is that you are wired for love. You are literally do not have a protein structure, organ in your body that is designed for anything in this zone, the toxic zone. You have a love, power, and a sound mind. Number one, your mind is your 99% of who you are. And it moves through your brain and your body. Your brain and your body are the physical 1%. Okay? So when you are, your basic design is one of power, love, and soundness. So you also on top of that have free will. You can choose. And if you choose, that is what love is. If God wanted robots, God would have made robots. But because God loved, God made humans in his image able to choose. So choice means you can choose wrong. You can choose to step out of wisdom, out of the substance and evidence that we live in. Quantum physicists, as I've mentioned, Sir Roger Penrose specifically, has done the mathematical calculations showing that we right now are sitting in wisdom. You are immersed in it. It's all around you. Heaven is at hand. Okay? We see that in the scriptures. So you now have the ability to choose. And so your core being is one of mental health. When we choose wrong, we step out and into mental ill health. So mental ill health is definitely not a disease. Heart problems are a disease. Diabetes is a disease. Fatty liver is a disease. Fatty liver problems are a disease. Whatever. There's many cancers are a disease to the body. So the physical 75 to 100 trillion cells can experience physical disease. We can identify those through advanced medical technology, and we can treat those. That's the 1%. So the biomedical model, which looks at which actually can see through different testing what's physically wrong to find the cardiovascular disease, the cancer, the immune disorders, the autoimmune disorders, etc., the diabetes, the liver problems, the whatever it may be. That is a brilliant model for the 1%. But when it comes to mind, when it comes to the spiritual nature, when it comes to how we are thinking, feeling, choosing, when it comes to how we are bringing all thoughts into captivity, when it comes to renewing of the mind, we can't apply the biomedical model. We can't say that your life immersed in your story and your context of your life is now, that is one of maybe tremendous trauma or something, whatever you've gone through, maybe some major things, or going through financial stuff, or you've got suicide in your family, or there's a divorce, or there's whatever going on in your life. And we all have stuff going on all the time of to different extremes. You can't say that experience is now a disease of the body or the brain, which is what they are telling us. So when you experience a suicide in your family, or a death in your family, or you're bullied as a child, or you have some tremendously traumatic experience, or you just have some really toxic bad habits that you haven't dealt with, and that experience is making you feel anxious or depressed, or like you're going to have a psychotic break, you are not ill in your brain or your body. You are broken in your mind. And that mind needs healing. So we can't say that you have a physical illness, which is what they're saying today, which is what they're talking about mental illness as being. So they're treating it as though it is a cancer or something like that. It's not. And what that is doing is it's taking something, diagnosing it, labeling it, and sticking it in a box and locking you in, and not acknowledging your spiritual part of you, your story, your context. To tell someone who's been repeatedly raped 100 times a day, which is what one young woman came and told me at a conference a few years ago, came up to me and told me how she'd been raped 100 times a day and she'd been saved from sex trafficking and she had got through this. To tell someone like that, obviously she was depressed. Obviously she had post-traumatic stress disorder. Obviously she had extreme anxiety. Does that mean that she has a brain disease? A neuropsychiatric brain disease of PTSD, bipolar, anxiety, panic disorder, and all the labels that she was given? Or does it mean that she has a story? And that story is an experience that needs to be validated and heard and processed? Is that not what's more important? And that we do it in deep, meaningful connection where we connect with each other, is that not more important than just saying, oh, you have a disease, here is an antipsychotic, here is an antidepressant, here is an anti-anxiety med. And those meds we call psychotropic medications, and they are extremely dangerous. They were identified and discovered around about 60 years ago and have completely exploded in developed countries and have caused major, major problems because they are not anti-anything. When I say antibiotic, we know that an antibiotic is fighting a bacteria. That's physically what it's doing. So we then think antidepressant is fighting depression. It's not. We've been lied to. I've done this research for 30 years. I work with top scientists in the world. I have all the evidence on my webpage, in my books, and there's thousands of sites, more than 1 million survivor sites talking about what I'm talking about now. Okay, so these do not fix the problem. They numb the brain. So you may feel for a season that they are helping you. It's called medication spellbinding, where you are bound, where you literally disconnect the spirit and the mind and the brain. So the mind and the brain literally become disconnected because the brain becomes numbed and the brain becomes damaged. And actually, when the drug wears off, now the brain has changed so much. So now these toxic changes in the brain make you feel worse. You see, there are more than 3,000 side effects, between 1,800 and 3,000 side effects of every single one of these antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety meds, and stimulants like Ritalin. They have nothing positive. We've been lied to about the scientific facts. If you're on them, do not feel guilty. If you're on them, do not feel guilty because guilt, shame, and condemnation will keep you bound. Use this knowledge to celebrate. Say, I'm excited about what I'm hearing. I'm going to find out more. I'm going to get wisdom. I'm going to get knowledge, and I'm going to learn how to withdraw. That's what you do. You don't just stop them, you've got to withdraw. And there's a lot of information on withdrawal, and the best withdrawal that I recommend, once you make the decision, if you make the decision, I can't force you, it's your choice, but if you make the decision, which would be a very wise decision to make, to come off these medications, and I'm not talking about heart medication, guys. I'm not talking about if you have diabetes. I am talking about antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety meds, and stimulants like Ritalin that every second child is being put on these days. It's like speed. It is the same formula as speed, okay? So basically, we are creating a whole addiction in our children. This is the most medicated generation ever in history. And we're shortening lifespans, which I spoke about last night. These drugs shorten lifespans by 15 to 25 years. Okay, we have countries like the United States of America that are using these psychotropics have increased their disability by 4 to 5 times, because people become disabled on these drugs. But you can reverse this. But why are you depressed in the first place? Why are you anxious in the first place? Why are you on edge in the first place? Why are you having a psychotic break in the first place? Because you have a valid story. Maybe you were raped 100 times a day. Goodness, who wouldn't be psychotic after that? You don't need a label or a drug which will make you worse on top of what you've gone through. You need to be allowed to process the issue. You need to be able to bring it up and start weakening it and talk about it and process it and reconceptualize it and go through the process. And that is what I developed in my work over the years, over 30 years, and developed techniques. And the basic technique is a 5-step process of how you identify a thought, how you break it down, how you reconceptualize it, and recognize that this is part of your suffering. It's not, you don't numb it, you don't suppress it, you don't put a band-aid on it where it's still festering underneath. You bring it up and you reconceptualize it. The basic principle of what I teach is demonstrated in the Garden of Gethsemane. So what did Jesus do in the garden? Now, I know you know the whole story of the garden, so I'm going to tell you the other side of the story. Jesus demonstrates how you're supposed to live life on a day-to-day basis as you are in for however many years that you live. Number one, when the human condition is such that you are going to face events and circumstances you can't control that are going to be terrible, okay? That's number one. Number two is you don't suppress the thoughts. You don't drug the thoughts. You bring the thoughts into captivity. What did Jesus do? He went in the garden and he sweated blood. Jesus took all those toxic issues of the world. He demonstrated all the things that you're going to go through as a human. Jesus took on him. I don't even understand that. No one understands it. It's some miraculous thing, but Jesus was demonstrating a principle. And that principle was face your stuff. Embrace your stuff, face your stuff, process your stuff. This is why we have the garden, why we have the cross. So as we process it, it's not a quick fix mentality. It's not going to happen instantaneously. It is going to take time. So we know Jesus spent hours in the garden. We know that the whole process was 3 days. It doesn't mean that it's only going to be hours and 3 days. It just means there's a time factor. From science, I have researched extensively over 30 years how long it takes to form a thought, a memory. A memory is a thought. Okay, in terms of making a long-term memory, what is a short-term memory, and how do you break it down? How long does it take? How long does it take to form a habit, etc.? It takes 21 days to form a long-term memory. Within 24, like right now, you're building memory, but it's short-term. It will go away within 24 to 48 hours if you don't stabilize the memory. So there's a time factor involved. Paul talks about running your race. There's always time involved in process. If you look at the stories in the Bible, look at David and track the history of David, there's time. It wasn't just instant, but yet we're in an instant age where we want instant, pastor lay on hands, doctor give me a pill. We've got to get beyond that. That's a big problem in today's generation. Quick fix mentality. Forget the quick fix. It's going to take time. And you're going to sweat blood. You can sweat blood. When you are really under extreme emotional pressure, your sympathetic and parasympathetic system are kind of like in conflict with each other. And you can actually cause your blood pressure to rise to a point where your blood vessels can start bursting and you can start leaking blood under your skin. Okay, so this is not an unrealistic situation that we read in the Bible. It's metaphorical, it's real, it's everything. Jesus always works. God always works on multiple levels. Okay, so I'm not saying the story of Jesus is metaphorical. I'm saying that we've got to take the elements like time. I can't tell you how quickly you're going to take to get through something. I don't know, because you're different to me. You are unique. You have your own unique story. What I want to do is honor your story. Depression, anxiety, psychotic breaks, schizophrenia, these are not illnesses, but they're very serious issues. They are phenomena. They are constructs. They are descriptions that there's something major going on in your mind, that your mind needs renewing. Those are indications. When you feel depressed and you embrace that depression, you are acknowledging that you need to deal with something toxic. Whether it is a toxic habit, or whether it is which is voluntary, or whether it is an involuntary trauma. Do you understand this? Okay, there's 2 categories in the zone. So depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, psychotic breaks, hearing voices, addictions, all these things are not illnesses. These are very strong signals, broad umbrella signals, telling you, hey, you are depressed. There's something that you need to capture. There's some specific story and context that needs to be dealt with. Maybe it's a forgiveness. Maybe it's a trauma. Maybe it's a bitterness. Maybe it is a bullying. I don't know what it is. But we've all got our stuff. And if you don't deal with it, it stays there festering, because you're not wired for toxicity, you're wired for love. So this causes brain damage. And this is why your whole body responds. And we have things called discomfort zones in our body that help us when we become deliberate about renewing our mind, we can tune into the discomfort zones of our body and recognize when my heart is pounding, or when I've got that tip of the tongue phenomenon, or when I've got that just awareness that this is the Spirit of God telling you, wake up, step into wisdom. What am I telling you? Find the underlying root cause. Okay, so tune in so that you can then say and do the right thing. Okay, so these are basic principles. Now, in this book over here, I talk about the discomfort zones, and I talk about the concept of you being wired for love. Okay, in this book, I talk about the 21 days detoxing, and I've also got an app called the Switch app that we've just released that's putting all of these concepts into a very user-friendly form on your phone. Okay, and then I'll talk about those in a moment. Now, I want to show you some slides quickly. The first slide, we're going to now kind of summarize everything I've said by looking at a bunch of brain slides, okay? Because we've only got a few minutes left. Okay, so, goodness, I need hours. Okay, so this is inside your brain. This is your brain. I still do research. I've still just done a series of clinical trials where I look at when you renew your mind, you change your brain. Now, this is an actual human brain, a real live human thinking. This is what's happening in your brain at the moment. I showed you this last night, those of you that were here. That firing that you see over there, that is your thinking, feeling, choosing, 99% spiritual part of you moving through your brain, and your brain is responding on a quantum, electromagnetic, electrochemical, and genetic level. So you make your brain change. You change your brain. You're growing stuff in your brain, like I said in the beginning. Look at the next slide. The next slide is actual brain slides growing in a Petri dish, but this is what's happening inside of your brain, and it's slowed down tremendously. So this is happening at incredibly fast speeds. The little branches you see growing are made of millions of proteins, and each of the little proteins is a quantum neurobiological computer. As you're listening to me now, you are growing branches like this, made of these millions of little quantum neurobiological computers. These are the leaves are like the branches. You're growing these little branches. These are thoughts that are growing. You're growing thoughts. This is what you're doing in your brain right now. And as you are growing, each of those little proteins that the growing thing is made of are these quantum neurobiological computers. You have millions in your brain. You're growing millions daily. One, and you have gazillions if you add up everything. Okay, one is more powerful than all the computers on the planet. You are brilliant. You have a love, power, and a sound mind. How are you using that mind? Are you using that mind to rejoice despite the circumstances? Are you able to, in the midst of the cancer, the trauma, the financial thing, are you able to internally release the wisdom of God that is inside of you and rejoice despite that? Can you still love God if the cancer doesn't go and you live with it for the next 20 years? Because people will see that as a reflection of God's glory. You don't have to be 100%, okay, the cancer's gone. If it's gone, great. But if it's still there and you're rejoicing, that's more of a miracle. That's what can you be in the midst of your issues. That is true success. It's an internalized thing. We've got to change our perspective. We've got so caught up in a materialistic world that we've forgotten about the real things that matter. Okay, if you look at the next slide, look at the power God has given you with your love, power, and your sound mind. Look at the red writing and look diagonally up from the red writing. These little blobs are just another view of inside the brain of these neurons, of your thoughts, of these neurons with these little branches that are called dendrites. Each cluster of white is millions of little branches. Each branch is holding information, and they group together into these little clusters, and these are your thoughts, and you have trillions of these in your brain. You're always building them, and you're always changing them. Your brain's always changing. This is why we can change our thoughts, which is so great to know. So if you have a look, now Mac's been playing it a few times, but if you look at the red numbers and diagonally up, you'll see one little bubble that's got a couple of connections coming out of it. Watch how it shivers and shakes and grows and pops. Did you see that? That is renewing of the mind. When you get in the garden and you agonize and you celebrate and embrace, number one, celebrate and embrace, remember, not celebrate and embrace the toxicity, celebrate and embrace the fact that God has made provision for us to acknowledge our issues. That's cause for celebration. And then scientifically, as soon as you're consciously aware, you can change. If you suppress, you can't change. It just gets bigger. So we celebrate. We get in the garden. We don't do it alone. Jesus woke up the disciples and said, can you not stay awake with me for but an hour? Jesus didn't ask for an antidepressant or a painkiller or to get zicked out the garden. Jesus just wanted them to be with him. And that's what we're supposed to be. Deep, meaningful connections is you don't do life alone. It's not about you. It's about you in the world. People are dying from isolation. I told you this last night. More people die, or as many people die annually from isolation as they do from cancer and cardiovascular disease and autoimmune disorders. That's insane. The United States of America is one of the most individualized societies. Our youth are the loneliest in the world. If we have gone away from community. We do the opposite of what Jesus demonstrated. That's why I keep teaching Jesus. Because Jesus said, face your stuff together. And then, guess what? You don't stay in your stuff and become a whiny, moany, stay in your stuff person. And it's all about me, myself, and I. I told you last night, if people, the more times you say me, myself, and I, the more you increase your chance of having a cardiovascular event, which is a heart attack, by 42% in the next 12 months. So the less you say I, me, and mine, the healthier you will have a healthier heart. So it's about you facing your issue with others. In the midst of your pain, in the midst of being in the garden, send a text to you, someone who you know is battling, and say, hey, do you want to go for coffee? Can I listen to you? So we have been taught, I need my therapy. I need me. Fix me, God. Fix me, God. Everyone listen to me. In the midst of me, you should be helping others. It will increase your healing by 68%. And then you're going to nail it to the cross. And then you're going to nail it to the cross. And then you're going to rise again. And when you rise again, you have freedom and peace, but you've got the wounds. You have got the war wounds. Your suffering shapes you. So you're not supposed to forget the war wounds, the nails in your hands, the marks. Those are your trials that have become testimonies. And that makes you real, and it makes you humble, and it makes you recognize your brilliance. And that's what we're supposed to be doing as humans. Okay, so how much time do I have left, Pastor? Where is the time? Have I gone over? Can I have a minute or two just to finish this? Is that okay? Is that okay? Okay, thank you. I want to show you very quickly. This is going to take about 3 minutes. We're going to look at, Mac, just show the theory slide. As a scientist, I developed a theory. This is a scientific theory, but it teaches on the spirit-soul-body connection. It teaches on all this spiritual stuff and how God is the source of everything. That green and the purple part is, and it's all sciencey stuff. I mean, this is complex theory. Okay, this is a complex theory of how the mind-brain works. It's in all these books and adapted down to and what is relevant of the theory in each book. The green and the purple part are your 99%. The green part is your non-conscious mind that operates 24/7. It is this incredibly powerful quantum connection to the Spirit of God. Okay? The purple part is when you are awake. It's your conscious mind. The purple part is only awake when you're awake. The green part's always awake. So everything about you, your love, power, sound mind, and then everything else you put on top of it through your choices is stored in the green part. And it is basically feeding in to the conscious mind. So as you face an issue during the day, your decision about how you are going to function is based on what's stored in the green. If that green stuff is not renewed or being renewed, or if you're not renewing, if you're not in a self-regulated state where you can see, hey, this popped up from the green. I'm looking at this situation like this. I'm triggered by this. So I'm going to have the same irritated argument again because this is who I am. Then you have not renewed what's in the green. But if you're living a renewed life and this pops up in the situation, you get in the garden and say, okay, I've been responding like this. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to change. And you'll do the work of going through the 21 days because it takes at least 21 days to pop off all these branches, break down the toxic thought, reconceptualize, build a healthy new thought, and then you've got to practice that for another 42 days, another 2 cycles of 21, because we see from scientific research that the physical body heals in cycles of 21 days from blisters and cuts and wounds and viruses in as many cycles as are needed, but it's cycles of 21 days. The mind does the same thing. It works through cycles of 21 days. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's not a quick fix. You could be in the garden for 63 days times 5. I don't know. Who cares? Just do it, because that's what you're supposed to do. You'll get it on the cross eventually. You will rise eventually. You will have your war wounds to share eventually. And the second 2 cycles of 21 days, when you go to day 42 and 63, turns it into, automatizes it, which makes it a habit. Habits do not form in 21 days. That's a myth. They form in a minimum of 63 days. So if you want to effect change in your life, if you don't want to be a clanging gong, stuff coming out of your mouth, you are going to have to practice using the new way of thinking. There's a deliberate and intentional work that is required in terms of changing yourself. Look at this slide now, and then I'll carry on with this in the next session. But this is the last slide I'm going to show you. There's a graphic here. It's a collective graphic of research that I've done. I'm still currently doing research. If you want to know my research and the results of them, you can go to drleafresearch.com. We'll show you that slide as well. There we go. There's that slide. You can take a screenshot and find out more. I feed that back to the community for free through all my podcasts, etc. But I want to show you a simple graphic. Mac, if you can just show the mind changes the brain graphic. Now, this graphic shows you collectively from a lot of different research that I did over this time period. It's just a very powerful graphic. I looked at institutions and organizations, different kinds of institutions and organizations, churches, schools, corporates, etc. And I wanted to know, what is, within an institution, there are individuals, obviously. What is the collective change that is happening within an institution? So let's say it's a church. What's the change, the average change that is happening within a church? In other words, are people growing? Okay, so the research shows no, that people go up and down, so it kind of stays the same, status quo. What will shift that to get the graphic growing? Only when people renew their minds. Only when you are deliberate and intentional about self-regulating every 10 seconds, learning to stand back and observe your thinking, feeling, and choosing. In other words, bringing all thoughts into captivity. Only when you deliberately and intentionally do that in terms of detoxing and in terms of building your brain, learning new knowledge, getting wisdom, getting discernment. What does Proverbs say? Get wisdom, get understanding, get discernment. You're intellectual. Only if an environment starts a detoxing and brain-building type approach to through life, only then will we see the 35 to 75% plus changes in a person's life. If we're going to impact the world with God's glory, we as a church are going to have to start renewing our minds and stop talking and start doing. Thank you. See you next session.